This is Just Listen, hosted by George. Today is March 10th, 2025. Welcome to the podcast. This is an exciting week for me because it's actually warmer outside and I'm looking out at the sunshine. So I'm excited that I think winter is over. Today, I want to talk about the U.S. federal government policy on closing the Department of Education. If you will remember, I did a podcast about the Department of Education probably about a month and a half ago. So this isn't a follow up, but I want you to look at it from this perspective. Why voters should listen to the reasoning for downsizing funding for the Department of Education. Now, I worded that this way to draw your attention to what's not being talked about by the mainstream media. The first thing is they're going to have to downsize it. As you are aware, in the House of Representatives, the Republicans are only up by 2 or 3 votes, so they could actually push through eliminating the department. I don't think that they would, but they could. And the Senate, you need 60 votes to pass anything. So I don't think that in the next 4 years they're going to close that department. And in the previous podcast, I told you the structuring and all of that stuff of it. Okay, so we have a new Secretary of Education, and she is quoted as saying she is going to take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Education Department based on the maximum extent appropriate and permitted by law. Okay, that's what the executive order is going to say. And they cannot close the Department of Education. That's why the executive order is going to be written to this effect. Because the secretary can downsize it, but she can't close it. And closing it pretty much means that they're going to quit funding certain requests. And I'm going to get to where the big discussion is at that no one is really talking about in depth, right? Because when we're talking about all of these cuts, my only recommendation to the people in Washington who want to close things is to clearly explain why they're doing stuff so that voters can go, oh, okay, well, that's why we're closing it. Okay, so here is an example. So I want to focus on the big one that I thought got the attention of voters in the states and politicians. It was the DEI program. And as you know, I've talked about that in the past. But how did it apply to the Department of Education? Well, I'm going to tell you. Again, you have to listen to the podcast to really find out facts and details. Okay, so here are some of the things that the Congress in 2022 funded and made it part of the Department of Education. And the big thing was the DEI program. Okay. Education aimed to create a welcoming environment for all students and staff. So that met with DEI that the Department of Education was paying for was recruitment, curriculum. Curriculum was using culturally relevant and inclusive materials. Now, I don't know what that really means. Professional development, Student support, fostering a sense of belonging and identity for students. Now, why did I mention these? These are American issues. They are not exclusively, I would call them DEI issues that need to be addressed. It needs to be addressed for everyone. When I was in school, as far as I remember, I was there to learn how to read, write, and arithmetic. And it is interesting to me that we put this money into a program which would apply to everybody. Campus culture, for example, shaping a campus culture to be welcoming. Welcoming to who? I mean, who doesn't? Now, there is a social class differences between people. We had the really smart students, we had the average students, we had the students who were there and didn't want to be there, if that's who they're talking about. But my point is, these are American high school, grade school issues. And the other side cannot be surprised that the Department of Education wants to get rid of programs like this because some of these would be redundant. And they even go on further, like to implement these programs through the Department of Education. It's in hiring practices, classroom practices, career advancement, and tenure processes. Well, don't we have a teachers union? Well, why? But that'd be for a different program. But I'm trying to paint the picture of, we spent, the Harris and Biden administration in 4 years spent over $1 billion of taxpayer money on including this into the Department of Education. That's why now they are looking at downsizing the Department of Education. Now, the mainstream media is going to talk about the other elements of this, but imagine $1 billion in 4 years being spent on programs that you gotta wonder why we really need them. If things are as bad as they're saying here, then we need to go to courts and let the courts decide if people are being treated differently in grade school and high school and even college. So that is the reason why voters need to get all of the facts before they pass judgment. And if you watch the mainstream media, you would definitely be against them closing the Department of Education. They are not, meaning the mainstream media, is not getting into the facts and details. They need to downsize it, and there's so many issues. But the reason that I brought up the DEI, that set some folks off for various reasons. And why are we going to school? If we're bringing cultural issues into school, then we're going to have all kinds of disputes. Again, when I was in school, grade school, I remember some of that. We were focused on content. We weren't focused on what somebody looked like. Now, some people might say, and this has actually gotten better, under the American Disabilities Act, which has been in place since George H.W. Bush has been president. And in North Carolina, they're already doing it. So, how we treat people, we're good at treating people pretty darn nice. And to include them, meaning people with disabilities under DEI, I think that's a little bit unfair because they are covered in other programs. And I just think that whoever put some of this stuff in place, they were doing a subtle targeting of people to include to make their point of view stronger. Also, in the Department of Education, when they made these changes, they also hired a lot more people to deliver these services to the schools. And as you know, the Department of Education will only give you funding if you agree with their point of view in Washington. That was the other thing, because the Department of Education, as I've stated in the previous podcast, has no legal authority over the schools whatsoever. They can advise, and in half of the states, which would agree with their point of view, they give them a lot of money. They also have contractors. They contract the services. These are big money contracts. So the voters should see this point of view of we're looking at downsizing, and we want the focus to be on academic skills and merit. This is Just Listen, hosted by George. Let me know what you think, and please subscribe to my podcast. Have a great day.